My name is Velthari, and I am writing this because my hands still shake when I think about that day. I had 6 rotations left before my homeworld burned. 6 rotations before the black ships of the Skarn Dominion reached the nursery systems where our children slept in their growing pods. 6 rotations before everything I loved became ash. I stood in the marble hall of the Galactic Concordant, my 6 limbs trembling, and I begged. I begged the Katari Collective, and they offered me prayers. I begged the Oranine Republic, and they sent observers who would watch us die and write reports. I begged the Methane Compact, and they told me our tragedy was sad but educational. No one would fight. No one would lift a single weapon against the Skarn, because everyone remembered what the Skarn had done to the Beluvan hives a century ago. The Skarn did not take prisoners. The Skarn did not accept surrender. The Skarn arrived, and then a world simply stopped existing. My people, the Zalothi, had been peaceful for 11,000 years. We grew crystal gardens. We sang to our young. We had forgotten what a weapon even looked like. And now we were going to be erased from the galaxy, and every civilized species in the Concordant was going to send flowers to our memorial and then go back to their dinners. I was sitting alone in the petition chamber, staring at my reflection in the polished floor, when an old voice behind me whispered a word I had been told never to speak. The voice belonged to an ancient Katari archivist, a being older than most stars in this sector. He leaned close to me and said one word. Humans. I turned to him with all 3 of my hearts pounding. I knew about the humans. Every child in the Concordant knew about the humans. They were the quarantined ones. The species kept behind the Sol exclusion treaties, locked away in their own little corner of the galaxy because of what they had done at Tesserk 200 years ago. No one even spoke about Tesserk anymore. The footage had been sealed. The witnesses had been given memory treatment. All anyone knew was that 47 species had voted, unanimously, to never let humanity off their leash again. The archivist told me the humans do not send armies. He said the humans send something else. He told me not to ask them. He told me that asking them was worse than losing. He told me that my children would be safer dead than saved by whatever the humans would send. I thanked him. I waited until he left, and then I filed the petition. The human response came back in 11 minutes. 11 minutes. I had been told human bureaucracy was slow, that they argued about everything, that their decisions took rotations to make. But the response was already sitting in my message queue before I had finished drinking my cup of root water. The message was short. It said only this: understood, dispatching package 7, stand clear of the drop coordinates. That was all. No signature, no seal, no promise of support or assurance of victory, just those few words, cold and flat like a note from a stranger. I contacted the Human Liaison Office to ask what Package 7 was. A small woman appeared on my screen. Her hair was gray at the edges and her eyes looked like someone who had not slept well in many years. Her name tag said Margaret Holt. She did not smile. She did not greet me. She simply waited. I asked her what Package 7 meant. I asked her how many soldiers were being sent. I asked her what kind of ships, what kind of weapons, what kind of strategy. I asked her a dozen questions in a rush because I was terrified and because I needed to believe something was coming. Margaret Holt waited until I was finished. Then she looked at me for a very long moment, and she said, "You should pray you never need to know what Package 7 is, sub-envoy. You should pray to whatever you pray to that we arrive, and we do our work and we leave, and you never learn our names." I tried to ask another question. She ended the call. 3 rotations later, the Skarn fleet was 2 jumps from my homeworld. My family sent me a final message. My mother sang the old song, the song mothers sing to their young when the young are very small. She sang it to me, a grown diplomat, because she believed she would not see me again. I watched the message 17 times. I could not reply. What does one say to a farewell? On the 4th rotation, The sensors of the Concordant observation fleet picked up something translating into our star system. I was on the flagship. I remember the officer at the scanner station making a strange sound, like something had stepped on her throat. I remember running to her station. I remember looking at the readings and not understanding them. It was one ship, only one. But it was the size of a small moon, and it was completely black, and it gave off no energy signatures that our instruments could identify. Our heat sensors wept. Our gravity detectors spun in confused circles. The ship had no markings. It had no running lights. It had no communication channels. It simply appeared, enormous and silent, and then it sat there waiting. I called Margaret Holt. I asked her if this was Package 7. I asked her where the rest of the fleet was. I asked her when the other ships would arrive. She told me there were no other ships. I did not understand. I asked her to repeat herself. I asked her if there had been a mistake. I told her the Scarn were bringing 400 capital vessels and 12,000 support craft. I told her we were facing an empire. I told her that one ship could not possibly be enough. Margaret Holt smiled then for the first time. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who has already seen the ending of a story you are only beginning to read. She said, "Sub-envoy, we are not sending you a fleet. We are sending you Package 7. There is a difference." I asked her what the difference was. She said, "A fleet is what you send when you want to win a war. Package 7 is what you send when you want to end the idea of war in the mind of your enemy forever." Then she told me to evacuate the observation fleet to a safe distance. She told me not to watch what happened next. She told me that some of my officers would have bad dreams for the rest of their lives if they watched. She told me to trust her and pull back. I gave the order. My captains did not argue. They had seen the black ship too, and none of them wanted to be anywhere near it. As we pulled back, I stayed at the observation window. I could not look away. I am not proud of this. I was a coward in many ways, but I was not coward enough to look away from the thing I had called into existence. I had summoned this. Whatever happened next, I wanted to see it with my own eyes. The black ship began to open. It did not open like a normal ship. It did not have doors or bays. A long seam appeared on its side, and then the seam widened, and then something inside began to glow with a soft white light. The light was not bright. It was not dramatic. It was the gentle, steady light of a room where something is waking up after a very long sleep. I watched and I waited, and I thought that any moment now I would see soldiers pouring out. Thousands of them, tens of thousands, a great army marching forward to save my people. But that is not what I saw. Instead, 9 small shapes walked out of the light, just 9. I counted them 3 times because I could not believe my own eyes. 9 figures walking slowly across the open space between their ship and the waiting dropship. They were not in formation. They did not march. They moved like friends walking to a cafe, casual and unhurried, as if they were not about to face an empire of trillions. I turned to Margaret Holt on my screen. My voice was very small. I asked her where the army was. She looked at me and her tired eyes were full of something I could not name. Pity, perhaps, or warning or grief. She said, "Sub-envoy, you asked for help. We are giving you help. But I need you to understand something before the next part starts. I need you to understand it very clearly." I asked her what. She said, "We did not send you an army. We sent you the people who end armies. And once they begin their work, we cannot call them back. No one can." Then she ended the call, and I was alone with my reflection in the glass. And 9 small shapes were walking toward my dying world. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, the Scarn fleet was still coming. The dropship carrying the 9 vanished into the void, and for a long while nothing happened. I stood at the observation window of our cruiser, watching empty space, waiting for some sign that the war had begun. None came. The stars just kept turning. Margaret Holt allowed me to come aboard her vessel. It was a small human ship, much smaller than our Concordant cruiser, and it smelled strange to me. The humans had brought the scent of their homeworld with them. There was something woody in the air and something sweet, and something I later learned was called coffee. Margaret poured me a cup. I could not drink it. She drank hers, and her hands were steady, and I envied her that. I asked her to tell me about the 9. I told her I needed to know. I told her that if my people were going to be saved or damned by these strangers, I deserved to know who they were. Margaret was quiet for a long time. Then she set down her cup and she began to speak. Her voice was calm, but underneath the calm there was something tight, like a wire pulled almost to breaking. She said each of them has a name we gave them, not their real names. Their real names were taken from them a long time ago when they became what they are. We do not remember what they were called when they were children. That information was sealed and the seals were buried, and the people who buried the seals have all passed on. What we have now are only the names they chose for themselves, or the names we chose for them. She told me the first one was called the gardener. I asked her what he grew. She told me he did not grow plants. She told me the gardener was a man who could walk into a room full of his enemies and without speaking a word leave behind a single idea in each of their minds, a small seed of an idea, and by the next morning that seed would have grown into something that consumed them from within, not their bodies, their certainty, their will, their belief in the cause they fought for. She said the Scarn soldiers who encountered the gardener would wake up in the morning and quietly put down their weapons and walk away from their posts, and they would not be able to explain why. They would go home. They would sit with their families. They would never fight again. I asked if that was a mercy. Margaret said it depended on what you thought mercy was. The second one was called the Hollow Man. She told me he was not quite in our universe anymore. Something had happened to him many years ago, some experiment the humans did not like to talk about, and now he existed slightly sideways to reality. He could walk through walls because the walls were not entirely there for him. He could walk through shields, through armor, through the hulls of warships. Nothing solid was solid to him, and when he wanted to, he could reach into a place and simply remove something. A commander from a command deck, a core from a reactor, a single thought from the mind of a general. The third one was called 9 of Hearts. I asked what that name meant. Margaret gave a small, sad smile and said it was the name of a playing card. She told me the woman had chosen the name herself many years ago because she said that was what she felt like. A single card in a deck of many, drawn at the wrong moment in the wrong game by someone who did not know the rules. 9 of Hearts had a way with numbers and with probability. She could look at a battle and see all the ways it could end, and she could nudge things gently so that only the ending she wanted actually happened. The fourth was called Choir. Margaret warned me not to listen to Choir speak if I ever met her because Choir did not have one voice. She had many, thousands of them layered together, all speaking at once, and when Choir spoke to an army, the army would forget which side it was fighting on. Soldiers would turn on their own commanders, not in anger but in gentle confusion. They would simply not remember who their friends were and who their enemies were. They would lay down their weapons or pick up someone else's and walk the other direction, and they would not understand why. The fifth was called the Understudy. She was the youngest of the 9, Margaret said, only 40 human years old. The understudy could look at any person and after a few minutes of watching them become that person. Not pretend to be, become their face, their voice, their memories, their habits. And when the understudy walked into a Scarn high command meeting wearing the face of their supreme marshal, every officer in that room would believe she was their leader, and they would follow her orders until she was finished with them. The sixth was called Brother Ash. Margaret did not want to tell me much about Brother Ash. She only said that he had been a priest once in some old human faith, and he had seen something terrible, and what came back from that seeing was not quite a priest anymore but still wore the robes. Brother Ash specialized in what Margaret called despair. He could walk onto a battlefield, sit down calmly in the middle of it, and within an hour, every soldier around him would lose the will to continue. Not their lives, their purpose. They would simply sit down beside him and weep and never fight again. The seventh was called Patience. She was old, Margaret said, much older than she looked. Patience did nothing but wait. That was her ability. She would arrive at a place, sit down and wait. And whatever needed to happen for her enemy to lose would happen. A wall would fall. A ship would break down. A general would choke on a piece of food. A storm would come at exactly the wrong moment. Patience did not cause these things. She simply waited, and the universe arranged itself around her waiting. Margaret said Patience frightened her more than any of the others, because Patience did not seem to need to do anything at all. Things just happened around her. The eighth was called Second Sunday. Margaret laughed a little when she said that name. It was the only time I saw her laugh. She told me Second Sunday was the kindest of the 9. He baked bread. He remembered birthdays. He wrote letters to his mother every week. And he had the ability to walk into any place that was locked, any vault, any cell, any sealed chamber, and open it. Nothing could stay closed to Second Sunday. He did not use tools. He did not use force. Things simply opened when he asked them to. Margaret stopped there. She did not want to tell me about the 9th. I pressed her. I told her I needed to know. I told her I had earned the right to know. She closed her eyes. She was quiet for a very long time. And then she said, "The 9th one does not have a name. We do not call it a name because we do not want to call it at all. The other 8 know what it is. They keep their distance from it. They do not speak to it if they can help it. They do not look at it directly." I asked her what it was. She said, "We did not build the 9th. The other 8, yes, we made them. We took ordinary people and we changed them, and they volunteered and they knew what they were becoming. But the 9th we found, in a deep place on our homeworld, under ice, under stone, under time. We did not know what it was. Our scientists studied it for 100 years before they even understood it was alive. And then, when the troubles came and the old wars began, someone made the decision to take it out of its vault. Just once, just for Tesserk." I felt something cold move through all 3 of my hearts. Tesserk, the word no one said. Margaret opened her eyes. She looked at me and her face was gray. She said, "After Tesserk, we put it back. We built new locks. We built new vaults. We promised every species in the galaxy that we would never open those vaults again, and we meant it. For 200 years we kept our promise." I asked her then, with my voice shaking, why she had told me this, why she was telling me about the 9th now. Margaret Holt looked at me and her tired eyes were wet, and she said, "Because we sent the 9th with the other 8. We had to. The Skarn are too many. The Skarn are too strong. The other 8 are powerful, sub-envoy, but even they could not do this alone. We needed the 9th. We woke it up. We put it on a leash the other 8 would hold, and we sent them all to you." I asked her if the leash would hold. She did not answer. Outside the observation window, the stars kept turning, and somewhere in the dark between them, 9 small shapes were walking toward an empire. And one of those shapes was something that had been sleeping under the ice of a distant world for longer than any of our histories could remember. I finally understood why every other species had told me not to ask the humans for help. I understood why the archivist had whispered the word. I understood why Margaret's eyes looked the way they did. The humans had not been quarantined because they were cruel. They had been quarantined because they were willing to make the other 8, willing to find the 9th, willing to open the vault when no one else would. I sat in Margaret's small ship, holding a cup of cold coffee I could not drink, and I waited for the first reports to come in. The first signs of what the 9 were doing. The first proof that I had done the right thing. Or the worst thing, by filing that petition. The reports, when they came, did not read like anything I had ever read before. They did not read like war. They read like ghost stories. And I realized, sitting there in the quiet, that the war had already started and I had missed it, because the war the humans fought did not look like any war the galaxy had ever seen. The first report came in from a Skarn forward station called Kelusate. It was a supply depot on a small moon, far from the main battle lines, holding 40,000 Skarn soldiers and enough fuel and food to keep the invasion fleet running for a year. Our scouts had not dared go near it. The Skarn defenses there were layered and cruel. And then, without warning, Kelusate went silent. No distress signal, no explosion, no enemy engagement on any of our monitoring arrays. The station simply stopped communicating with the Skarn command network. Our scouts, cautious at first, crept closer. They expected a trap. They expected to find the station destroyed, or to find it full of enemy activity, or to find anything at all. What they found was worse. The station was still there. The lights were still on. The air recyclers were still humming. The gravity plating was still functioning. In the mess halls, meals were still on the tables, warm in some cases. Cups of the bitter Skarn drink were still half full. In the barracks, beds were unmade as if their occupants had just gotten up. In the command center, the displays still showed the last reports being processed. But there were no Skarn. Not one. Not a body, not a sign of struggle, not a single trace of where 40,000 soldiers had gone. They had simply ceased to be present. The scouts searched every room, every closet, every ventilation shaft, every airlock. Nothing. They found no blood. They found no weapons discharged. They found no damage to the station at all. The only unusual thing the scouts found was in the central command chamber. There, carved into the metal floor with what seemed to be a single finger, was a word. The word was not in any language the scouts recognized. When they transmitted the image back to our translators, the translators made a strange sound and shut themselves off. When the image was sent to the concordant linguistic archives, 3 of the archivists reported headaches and asked to be excused from their duties. The word was never successfully translated. Margaret Holt looked at the image when I showed it to her. Her face did not change. She only nodded once and said quietly, "That would be the gardener. He likes to leave a marker. Do not look at that image for too long, sub-envoy. It plants things." I closed the image. I did not open it again. The second report came 3 rotations later. The Skarn Third Fleet, a formation of over 100 warships, engaged an unknown enemy in a region of space called the Orvanian Drift. The Skarn commander broadcast the engagement on their military channels, confident of victory. We intercepted the broadcast. We watched it. The footage showed the Third Fleet opening fire on empty space. There was nothing there, no enemy vessels, no decoys, no targets of any kind, but the Skarn gunners were firing at something. They were screaming over the comms. Their officers were shouting contradictory orders. Some of the ships began to turn on each other. Some began to fire on their own support craft. The formation broke apart within minutes. When the footage ended, the Third Fleet was in ruins. Not destroyed by an enemy, destroyed by itself. Every ship had turned on every other ship until none of them remained functional. Our analysts pored over the sensor data 100 times. They found no enemy vessels, no hidden signatures, no cloaking signatures, no third parties of any kind. The Skarn Third Fleet had simply lost its collective mind and done the work to itself. Margaret said that was choir. She told me choir had probably sung one note, just one, on a frequency only the Skarn could hear. And in that one note, she had placed enough confusion to turn allies into strangers and strangers into targets. Margaret told me choir had not raised a single weapon. She had only used her voice. The third report was the one that broke the concordance disbelief. The Skarn have rulers they call archons. These are not ordinary leaders. They are beings of tremendous age and power, each one ruling a sector of the Skarn Empire from a fortress so deep underground that no weapon in the galaxy could reach them. The archons are protected by 10 layers of shielding, by armies of bodyguards, by systems of scanning and defense that had never been successfully penetrated. No archon had been harmed in 3,000 years. The archon of the reaching hand, ruler of the sector nearest to my homeworld, sat on his throne one afternoon and gave a speech to his loyal officers. He spoke for an hour. He laid out plans for the invasion of the Zalothi nurseries. He was eloquent, commanding, terrible. He finished his speech, dismissed his officers, and retired to his private chambers. 3 rotations after that speech, a junior officer entered the chambers to deliver a report and found the Archon sitting in his chair, perfectly upright, perfectly still. The junior officer approached, spoke the proper greetings, waited for a response. No response came. The officer approached closer. The Archon did not move. The officer touched the Archon's shoulder. The Archon had been gone for 3 weeks. Not ill, not injured. Gone. The body was cold and had been cold for a long time. The attending physicians confirmed it. 3 weeks at minimum, possibly longer. But the speech had been given 4 rotations ago. Every officer in the reaching hand sector had heard it. Every officer had seen the Archon, had received his orders, had saluted and marched out to carry out his commands. Margaret Holt, when I brought her this report, sipped her coffee and said that would be the understudy. She was wearing his face. She was sitting in his chair. She was giving orders in his name for 3 weeks while he was already gone. And now every command he gave during those weeks is under question. Every troop movement, every supply order, every execution. The Skarn High Command does not know which of their own orders are real and which came from her. Their entire invasion plan has been poisoned from the inside. I asked Margaret how the understudy had gotten past all those layers of security. Margaret said Second Sunday opened the doors for her. I began to understand then in a way I had not understood before. The 9 did not work as individuals, they worked as a set. Second Sunday opened what was locked. The understudy stepped inside. Choir confused the defenders. The gardener planted his seeds. The hollow man reached through walls. 9 of Hearts made sure every outcome went their way. Brother Ash took the will to resist. Patience made the universe cooperate. And each of them made the others more terrible than they already were. More reports followed. The Skarn command network began to break down. Orders were being contradicted. Fleets were arriving at the wrong coordinates. Supply ships were being diverted to empty systems. Senior officers were committing errors they had never made before, or simply failing to report for duty, or sitting in their quarters with strange smiles, or refusing to eat. The great and terrible Skarn Dominion, which had burned whole civilizations to ash, was being taken apart not by fleets or by weapons, but by something like a cold that settles into the bones of a strong person and stays there. The war, if it could be called a war, lasted only 11 rotations. On the 12th rotation, the Skarn broadcast a message to every species in the Concordant. It was broadcast on every channel, on every frequency, in every language the Skarn knew. I was watching the Concordant central feed when it played. The Skarn Supreme Coil, their highest ruler, appeared on the screen. He was an old creature, his shell cracked and his many eyes dim. He did not stand in a grand chamber. He sat in what looked like a small room, alone, with no guards behind him. He looked very tired. He looked like someone who had not slept in many rotations. His voice was soft and it trembled. He did not threat. He did not bluster. He simply said, "We yield." He said it in the Skarn tongue and then in 15 other languages. We yield to the humans, we yield without condition. We will pay any reparation, we will return any territory, we will surrender any weapon, we will sign any document. We beg only one thing. We beg the humans to call their people home. We beg them to take the 9 back to where they came from. We will never speak against them again. We will never move against any concordant world again. We will cease to be a military power. We will disarm. We will become anything the humans wish us to become. Only please, please take them home. And then the Supreme Coil did something no Skarn had ever done in the history of their people. He wept, openly, on camera. Thick tears fell from his many eyes and his shoulders shook, and he whispered something in his native tongue that the translators rendered as, "We did not know. We did not know what you kept. We would not have moved against any world if we had known. Please, please take them home." The broadcast ended. The concordant chamber was silent for a very long time. I turned to Margaret Holt, expecting to see relief on her face, expecting to see pride. The humans had done what no one else could do. They had stopped the scarn. My homeworld was safe. My children would live. It was over. But Margaret Holt was not smiling. Her face was the color of old paper. Her hands were shaking around her coffee cup, and she had spilled some of it on her uniform, and she had not noticed. She was staring at nothing. I asked her what was wrong. I told her the war was over. I told her the scarn had surrendered. I told her she had won. Margaret Holt slowly set down her cup. She looked at me, and she said 8 of them have reported in. The 9th has not. I did not understand. I asked what she meant. She said, we have a procedure. After an operation, each of the 9 checks in on a private channel every 12 hours. This is how we know they are still themselves. This is how we know the work is done. 8 of them have checked in. The gardener, the hollow man, 9 of hearts, choir, the understudy, brother Ash, patience, second Sunday, all 8, on time, on schedule. She paused, she took a breath. She said the 9th has not checked in for 40 hours now. The 9th is supposed to check in every 6 hours, not 12, 6, and there has been nothing, not a signal, not a word, nothing. I asked her what that meant. Margaret Holt looked at me, and in her eyes I saw something I had never seen in a human face before. It was not fear. Fear is a small thing. It was something older, something deeper, something I can only call the awareness of a door that should not be opened, being opened right now, somewhere nearby. She said, sub-envoy, it means the leash has come off. It means the 9th is off its leash. And the other 8, who are supposed to keep it on its leash, have not reported that they are trying to put the leash back on, which means one of 2 things. Either they are still trying and have not yet succeeded, or they have already failed. I asked her which she thought was more likely. Margaret Holt did not answer me. She stood up. She walked to the communication console. She opened a channel back to Earth, and I heard her say into the channel, this is Holt at Xylothi Station. I am declaring a code black. Repeat, code black. Wake up the councils, wake up the vaults, wake up everyone. We have lost containment. The next part of this story is the part I have the hardest time writing down, even after all these years. My claws still tremble when I reach for the words, but I promised when I began this memoir that I would tell the truth, all of it, even the parts that make me afraid to be alive. Margaret Holt's Code Black began a chain of events across the Concordant that had never happened before. Within hours, every human vessel in the galaxy was moving toward a single coordinate. Within a day, human embassies on every world began to broadcast warnings. The warnings were strange. They did not say what the danger was. They only said if you are within 6 jumps of the Scarn homeworld, evacuate. Do not wait. Do not pack. Do not finish your meal. Get on a ship and go. Go anywhere else, go now. Most species did not listen. They thought it was a trick. They thought it was human paranoia. They had just watched the Scarn Dominion surrender, and they believed the war was over, and they believed the humans were making a fuss over nothing. The K'Tari Collective officially ignored the warning. The Oranine Republic said they would send observers to assess the situation. The Methane Compact was still writing its formal position paper when the first reports came in. The first reports came from a Scarn world called Melvith. Melvith was one of the outer worlds of the Dominion, already under surrender terms, its fleets disarmed, its cities peaceful for the first time in 1,000 years. The people of Melvith had celebrated the end of the war. They had held feasts. They had released their political prisoners. Their children had been allowed to play outside the shelters for the first time in many rotations. And then one morning, Melvith stopped responding. It was not like Kelusate. There the soldiers had simply been gone. On Melvith, the sensors still showed life signs, millions of them, but the communications had all stopped. No government broadcasts, no news feeds, no personal calls, no merchant traffic. The life signs were there, but no one was speaking. A K'Tari observer ship, the first to arrive, reported that the cities of Melvith were intact. The buildings stood, the streets were clean, the gardens bloomed, but the people of Melvith were all sitting, everywhere. In their homes, on their steps, in their public squares, in their gardens, sitting. not moving, not eating, not speaking, just sitting and looking at nothing with small smiles on their faces. The Qatari observer flew lower. He broadcast his findings back to his ship. He said the people of Melvith did not respond to hails. They did not respond to the noise of his vessel. They did not respond to anything. They were breathing. Their hearts were beating, but no one was home inside them. He said the word home, and then he stopped broadcasting. His ship did not return. A second ship sent to find the first returned with its crew in the same condition, sitting, smiling, not present. Margaret Holt received this news in the communications hub of her ship. I was with her. She read the report twice. Then she set it down and she said, "That was not Brother Ash. Brother Ash takes the will. This is something else. Something is taking the people themselves." I asked her what was taking them. Margaret did not answer. She was already calling Earth. I heard her speaking to someone on the other end, and the someone was speaking back in a voice that was very quiet and very calm and very terrible. I could not understand the words, but I could understand the tone. It was the tone of someone who had prepared for this moment for a very long time, and who had hoped, every day of those long years, that they would never have to use their preparation. More reports came in. The pattern spread. World after world in the Skarn sector went quiet in the same way. Not violence, not bodies, just people sitting, smiling, empty while their cities continued to function around them. Lights stayed on. Water kept flowing. But no one answered. No one came when called. No one ate. Slowly, the life signs began to fade, not because anyone harmed the people, but because the people were no longer there to take care of themselves. Margaret told me the ninth did not take life. That was not its purpose. The ninth took something smaller than life and larger than life all at once. It took the thing that makes a person a person. What was left behind was a body, a breathing, beating body, but the occupant had gone somewhere else. I asked her where. Margaret Holt said, "We do not know. We have never known. The ninth does not explain itself. It never has. It takes what it takes and it keeps it, and no one who has been taken has ever come back." I asked her then the question I had been afraid to ask since she first told me about the ninth. I asked her what had happened at Tessirk. Margaret Holt looked at me for a long moment. Then she told me. Tessirk, she said, had been a world much like Melvith. A smaller world in a smaller empire 200 years ago, back when humans had first been allowed to travel among the stars. The empire had attacked a human colony. The humans, young and inexperienced and angry, had taken the ninth out of its vault for the first time. They had not fully understood what it was. They had thought it was a weapon. They had sent it to Tessirk to end the attack. The attack ended within a rotation. The empire surrendered within 2, but the ninth did not stop. The ninth spread. From Tessirk it moved to the next world of the empire and the next and the next. The humans tried to call it back. They could not. They tried to stop it. They could not. They tried everything they knew how to do, and in the end they had to destroy 19 worlds, billions of people, entire civilizations to contain it. The other species of the Concordant sent their fleets to help. It took 400 warships, 6 months, and every weapon of mass effect any civilization possessed, to finally drive the ninth back into a single place, small enough to be locked away. After that, Margaret said, the Concordant quarantined us, and we accepted the quarantine. We agreed to never let the ninth out again. We built new vaults. We kept the keys with the most careful people we had. For 200 years we honored that promise. And then the Skarn came to your nursery worlds, Margaret said, and we broke the promise. Because the Skarn would not stop. Because no army in the Concordant could beat them. Because every species in the galaxy had told you no. Because you came to us with 6 rotations left, and we made a decision, in a small room on Earth, that we would rather break our word than watch your children burn. I sat in silence for a long time after she told me this. I finally asked her what would happen now. Margaret Holt said, now we try to stop it again, and we call for help. And we hope that this time, the other 8 can do what they could not do 200 years ago because there were only 5 of us then and there are 9 now. But I do not know, sub-envoy. I do not know if it will be enough. The Concordant Emergency Council convened within a day. Every species sent representatives. The chamber, which had been so cold to my petition only weeks before, was now packed with frightened leaders who had watched Melvith and the worlds that followed. They had seen the readings. They had seen the empty, smiling people. They had done the math on how quickly the pattern was spreading. Margaret Holt spoke to the council. She did not apologize. She did not make excuses. She laid out what had happened in clear and simple words, and when she was done, she said, "We need every fleet the Concordant can gather. We need every weapon. We need every species to send what they have. We are calling in the old treaty clause, the one every species signed after Tessark, that says humanity may request military assistance against our own creations if containment is ever lost. We are invoking that clause now, please." The chamber was silent. Then an Oranine admiral stood and asked against whom. Margaret Holt said, "Against the thing we sent to save the Xylothi. Against the 9th of Package 7. Against what we built, and what we should never have built, and what we should certainly never have let out of its vault a second time." The admiral asked how many worlds were already lost. Margaret said 17 at last count, all in the Skarn sector. The Skarn Dominion has effectively ceased to exist as a population, though the worlds themselves are still intact. The pattern is moving outward at the rate of 1 world per rotation. It is not slowing down. An old Katari counselor asked what would happen if the Concordant did nothing, if we simply stayed behind our borders and let it run its course. Margaret Holt looked at him, and she said in 400 rotations it will reach the edge of the Skarn sector, in 600 it will reach Xylothi space, in 900 it will reach Katari space, in 1200 it will reach Earth. It will not stop at Earth. It will keep going. It has no borders. It has no end. We built it to have no end. We thought at the time that being unstoppable was a good quality in a weapon. She paused. She looked around the chamber. She said, "I am asking you, every species represented here, to help us stop the mistake we made. If you do not help, none of us survive this. Not my people, not yours, not anyone." The vote was held. It passed. It was not unanimous. 3 species voted to abandon humanity to our fate. They argued that we had brought this upon ourselves, which was true, and that helping us was a risk, which was also true. But the majority voted yes, not out of love for us, out of understanding that the 9th did not care about borders. The coalition fleet began to assemble, ships from 47 species, weapons that had never been used in peace treaties, ancient things pulled out of storage, experimental things pulled out of research labs, everything the Concordant had. The other 8, meanwhile, had begun their own work. Margaret showed me transmissions from them. The gardener had sent a short message saying only, "We are trying." 9 of Hearts had sent a longer one, explaining that she was calculating paths forward, but that every path had a cost. Choir had said she would try to call to the 9th, to sing to it, but she did not know if it would hear her. Brother Ash had said he was going in alone, to see if despair could reach what will could not. Patience had said she was waiting, and that something would come. Second Sunday had sent a message that made Margaret cry. I did not understand why at first. The message was short. It said only, "If I do not come back, please tell my mother I loved her baking." Margaret read it 3 times. Then she put her face in her hands. The Hollow Man and the understudy had not sent messages. Margaret said they would be the ones closest to the 9th. They would be the ones trying to reach it physically. She said she did not expect to hear from them again. The coalition fleet launched. Margaret Holt offered me a seat on her vessel to observe. I accepted, though every instinct I had told me to flee. I had started this. I had filed the petition. I had summoned the 9. I had to see the ending, whatever that ending was. We jumped to the Skarn sector. We joined the coalition. And for 9 months we fought the thing we could not name. I do not have the words to describe that war. There were no battles, not as my people understand battles. There was only the slow, terrible work of driving a presence back into a box. Worlds had to be abandoned. Systems had to be sealed off. Ships that went in did not come out. Crews that were taken did not return. Every tool in the Concordance arsenal was used, and most of them failed. What worked in the end were the other 8. They died sub-envoy. They died one by one, holding the thing in place while the coalition fleets built the new vaults. Brother Ash went first, then the Hollow Man, then Patience, who had waited and whose waiting had ended at last, then Choir and Nine of Hearts and the Gardener and the Understudy. And finally, Second Sunday, who opened the last vault door and stepped inside with the 9th and closed the door from the inside, because only he could open it, and only he could be trusted to close it. No, I am wrong. There was one more, Margaret Holt. At the end, when Second Sunday was holding the door but the locks had not yet engaged, something was needed, something small, a final key. Margaret Holt, who had drunk coffee with me, who had told me the names of the 9, who had cried when Second Sunday sent his message about his mother's baking, stood up from her chair on her small ship, took off her uniform jacket, folded it neatly, handed it to me, and walked to the shuttle bay without speaking. She did not say goodbye. I think she did not trust herself to. She flew to the vault. She stepped inside with Second Sunday and the 9th, and she closed the last lock with her own hand. I found a note in the pocket of her folded jacket later. It was short. It said, "Sub-envoy, please tell your children we are sorry. We tried to be gentle, we really did. But the universe did not raise us to be gentle. It raised us to be the last thing standing. And sometimes that is the only thing that can save you. And sometimes it is the thing you need saving from. Please, do not ask us for help again. Please, do not make us open the vault." I kept the note. I have it still. It is in a small box beside my writing desk. I look at it sometimes, late in the evenings when my grandchildren are asleep, and I try to understand the people who wrote it. Earth was not destroyed after the war. The vote in the Concordant was very close. Many species argued that humanity had proven too dangerous to be allowed to exist. They argued that the vault would be opened again, someday, by some future human who decided the reason was good enough. They argued that we could not risk it. But other species argued, and I was among them, that humanity had also given up 8 of their 9, and one good woman named Margaret Holt, to fix what they had done. That without them, the scarn would have erased us. That without them, every species in the Concordant would be nothing but a fading memory. They argued that humanity's willingness to do terrible things was also a willingness to do terrible things on behalf of those who could not do them at all. They argued that a galaxy without humans was a galaxy where the next scarn dominion would face no resistance. The vote passed, barely. Earth was placed under stricter quarantine. The remaining vaults were watched by joint concordant teams. The humans accepted all terms. They did not argue, they did not complain, they knew what they had done. It has been 10 years now since that war ended. The Scarn sector is empty. The worlds are still there, still intact, still with their lights on. We do not go to them. We have agreed, all of us, to leave them alone. Perhaps in 1,000 years some brave souls will settle there again. Perhaps not. I do not know. My homeworld is safe. My children grew up. My grandchildren play in the crystal gardens and they sing the old songs, and they do not know how close they came to never existing. I have not told them. I do not know if I ever will. Sometimes at night I think about what Margaret Holt said to me that first day on her small ship when I asked her what Package 7 was. She told me to pray I never learned. She was right. I wish I had not learned. I wish I had not needed to learn. I wish my homeworld had not been the reason the vault was opened a second time. But I will tell you what I tell the young diplomats who come to me now for counsel, in the quiet hours of the evening, when they are deciding which species to call when their worlds are in danger. The other peoples of the galaxy evolved in gentle places, worlds that fed them, skis that did not try to kill them. They evolved to sing and to build and to love and to cooperate. They are beautiful, those peoples. I am one of them. I love my own people with all three of my hearts. But humans did not evolve in a gentle place. They evolved on a world that tried to end them every single day for 2 million years. Plagues and famines and ice and fire and predators with teeth and each other. They did not evolve to be the strongest or the fastest or the smartest. They evolved to be the thing that did not stop. They evolved to look at the night and the things in the night and to think, I could use one of those. They evolved to keep monsters in vaults, because sometimes you needed a monster, and it was better to have one ready than to be caught without. When you ask a civilized species for an army, they will send you soldiers. Soldiers have rules. Soldiers go home at the end of the war. When you ask humans for an army, they will ask you a question first. They will ask you how bad it is. And if you tell them it is bad enough, they will go to a room most of them do not know exists, and they will open a door most of them have never seen, and they will send out something they are afraid of, because the only thing more frightening than what humans keep is the thing that made humans need to keep it. I learned that lesson. It cost me nothing. It cost them everything. I hope, my young diplomats, that you never need to learn it. I hope your world stays safe. I hope the old empires stay asleep. I hope the dark between the stars stays empty. But if the day comes when it is not empty, when something terrible is moving toward your children, and every other species has told you no, and your rotations are running out, and you have no options left at all, then you will remember the humans. You will remember the quarantine. You will remember the reason for it. And you will have a choice to make. I will not tell you what choice to make. I do not have the right. I made mine and I have lived with it, and my grandchildren are alive because of it, and 8 good strangers and 1 good woman are sealed in a vault forever because of it, and the 9th is back in the dark, sleeping again, waiting to be needed a 3rd time. Do not make them need the 9th a 3rd time, please. If you hear nothing else I have said, hear that. Do not open the vault. Do not ask them to open it for you. Find another way. There is almost always another way. Almost.